शलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। नमो महावदान्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायिने कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामिने गौरत्विषे नमः। पंचतत्वात्मकं कृष्णं भक्तरूप स्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जन्माद्यस्य यतोऽन्वयादितरतश्चार्थेषु भिज्ञस्वराट् तेने ब्रह्म हृदय आदिकवये मुह्यन्ति यत्सूरयः। तेजो वारिमृदां यथा विनिमयो यत्र त्रिसर्गो मृषा धाम्ना स्वेन सदा निरस्तकुहकं सत्यं परं धीमहि। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य खलः प्रसीदतां ध्यायन्तु भूतानि शिवं मिथो धिया। मनश्च भद्रं भजता दधोक्षजे आवेश्यतां नो मतिरप्यहेतुकी। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 7, verse number 34. So these are instructions of Prahlad to his classmates, in which he is relating what he has heard from his Guru Sri Narada in the womb. So we read that in first about 14 verses he was speaking about Gyan or distinction between body and self. And then he said that although there are thousands of means for realizing this, but the one which is specifically propagated, approved and recommended by Supreme Lord himself is Bhakti Yoga. And the first in the list he said was Guru Shushrusaya Bhaktya Sarva Labdharpanena cha, that service to Guru. So this service to Guru is something very specific to Indian culture. There are teachers everywhere, there are gurus everywhere in all over the planet. But the way Guru is seen in Indian culture or Vedic culture is different. Here he is seen as a representation or rather personification of God himself. And therefore everywhere we see this service to Guru is the first or the beginning point of spiritual life. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu also, Rupa Goswami says that one should take shelter of Guru. Guru Padashre Tasmat Krishna Diksha Vishikshana. Krishna also says this in 11th Canto that one should take shelter of Guru and serve. So this is something very specific or unusual, and it's very difficult for a modern mind to understand it. Even those who study spiritual life or spiritual philosophy and speak about it, it is difficult to put 100% faith in this idea of Guru. But it is something which is to be experienced. Because you see, Guru is like another human being. It's not that he is walking on the air 6 inches above the earth or anything like that. He also walks. But then he is seen as special than human being. And in India, people were like that. There are so many stories in modern times. And we read in Mahabharata, in the very beginning, this story about these 3 students, Upmanyu, Aruni and Veda, how they respected and followed their Guru and they got perfection by that. So this Guru Shushrusha itself is the practice. Guru Shushrusha means service to the Guru. Studying from Guru is different from this. You study from Guru and you ask questions, as Krishna says, that tad vidhi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya. So he says also seva and pariprashna. So this seva in itself is a practice. And in the Upanishads there are stories like that. That previously the children, when they were 8-9 years old, they went to live with the Guru and they will do service. Not that immediately the teacher was teaching them. You know the story of Varochana, the king of Daityas, and Indra. So they went and lived in the ashram of Brahma, Prajapati, for 32 years and did service before they got their first class. First lesson they got was after 32 years of service. So many stories that people became perfect only by doing seva. And this is difficult to accept by the modern mind, that how it is possible. So Prahlad says, Guru Shushrusha Bhaktya. And that service has to be done with devotion, with love, with faith. Otherwise, just a work. You also go and do work in the office. That does not give any enlightenment. So this service is done thinking that that's my duty and I want to do this to please the teacher. And I will do anything what he says. So this is one thing which is specifically he mentions that besides other things. And there is sarvalabdharpanenacha, offering everything you have to the Guru. So complete surrender. And Sangena Sadhu Bhakta Nam, association with Sadhu. So each one of them can bring perfection. And Ishvara Aradhanenacha, worship of Ishvara. Shraddhaya Tat Kathayam Cha, hearing Katha. And Kirtana Anugam Karmana. So doing Kirtan of his qualities and activities. Tat Padambaro Dhyanat Tallinga Ikshana Arhanadini. So meditation on his feet, looking at the form and doing service to the deity. Hari Sarveshu Bhutashu Bhagavan Aste Ishvara. Iti Bhutani Bansa Kamaste Sadhumani. and to see that Lord is present in every living being. So this is what he recommends. These are all parts of Bhakti Yoga, and they can be performed together, only one of them, combination of them, they can all bring perfection to one. So he says that if one performs this, then one attains Rati or love of God. Vasudeva Bhagavati Yasan Lagte Rati. And after this, he describes how does this person behave when he attains this. So this is what Prahlad is going to describe now. It says, Nisamya karmani guna natulyan viryani lila tanubhi kritani yadati harshot pulkashu gadgadam pratkantha vidagayati rauti nrityati. So when a person has attained this rati or love, then he says that when he hears unparalleled qualities and activities of the Lord, which are performed by his Lila Tanu, his transcendental body, then Yadati Harsot Pulka Shugat Gadam Protkantha Vidayati. The devotee becomes very pleased, happy. His hair stands on the end and voice falters, chokes, and there are tears in his eyes. And then he says, Protkantha Udgayati Rauti Nityati. So he sings loudly. He may cry or dance. So these are the anubhavas, or the outcome of love. When love is there, then these things happen naturally, because he is so much full of joy. And as it was said in the previous verse, that he is completely free from material desires, lust, anger, greed, etc. So heart becomes absolutely pure, and then these activities of the Lord, they directly reflect in the heart of such a devotee, and then the anubhavas, they become manifest. So Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti says, Ratesh Chinnhani Aha, that these are the symptoms of Rati. Nisamyati, this verse, Karmani Dadhipayas Charyadini. He says the Karmani or activity he refers to, such as Krishna stealing milk, yogurt, etc. Gunan Bhaktavatshalyadini, and the qualities such as his love for his devotees. Viryani Govardhanudharan Kamsavadhadini, and his chivalrous acts such as lifting Govardhan or killing Kamsa. So when one hears this, then the love manifests in different ways. He sings, dances, cries, tears. All these sattvic powers become manifest in the body. Yada graha grastaiva kachid hasti akrandate dhyayati vandate janam muhusvasan bhakti hare jagatpate narayanati atma matir gatatrapaha. So he says at that time he is as if he is possessed by some being. So he sometimes laughs, sometimes cries, sometimes meditates, sometimes prays, and has no sense of shame. So it's not that he is thinking that if I do this, what people will think. So he goes beyond this concept. And sometimes he starts praying to the devotees of the Lord. He takes deep breath or starts shouting loudly, Hey Hare, Hey Jagatpate, Hey Narayana, and so on. So, Atma Matir Gatatrapa. So his mind becomes completely absorbed. So these are natural manifestations. Hare Jagatpate Narayana iti vacha bhakti. So with speech he speaks like this. He shouts the names of Lord. Atmana manusacha matir mananam yasyasa. And with the mind he thinks of the Lord. Bhava dasya sakhyadayas tesham bhavna dasu. Saka ham ityadi. And then he has some bhava towards the Lord, that I am servant of the Lord or I am friend of the Lord. So it is with that mood that he shouts, means in a specific mood in relationship with the Lord. Tadapuman mukta samasta bandhana stadbhavanukrita shayakృతిః nirdagdha bijanusayo mahiyasa bhakti prayogena sametya dhokshayam. So he says that at that time he becomes completely free from all bondage. Tada puman mukta samasta bandhana. So bondage is basically because of attachment or identification with the body. So at that time he does not have any concept like that. And tad bhav bhavna nukrita ashaya kriti. And he has some specific mood towards the Lord, and Lord becomes manifest in that particular relationship in his heart. Nirdagdha bijan shayo mahiyasa bhakti prayogena. So because of this bhakti, all his seeds of previous vasanas, they become completely burnt. So he does not have any more samskaras which can trouble him. All the various vasanas, the past old samskaras from previous lives, they get completely roasted by bhakti yoga. And sametya dhokshajam, he attains the Lord. Nacha sharir sadbhaveva samsara ashanketya. So one can raise objection that if he is living in the material body, then how he can be considered as liberated or free, because he is still existing in the body. So he says nirdagdha karmasha, nirdagdha bijanusayo mahiyasa. Nirdagdham purvameva vinashtam bijam prakriti buddhi anusayo vishavasana. So he says that actually his seeds or these vasanas, the desires, the subliminal desires from which the desires manifest in the mind, and the material intelligence, they are already burnt. And Anushaya Vishavasana says, and he has or she has no other desire except for devotion. Mahiyasa Anurag Margavata. So this person who is following this path of bhakti, Samiti Adhoksha Sanyogam Prapnati. And then he attains union with the Lord. So in this way, he explains how by engaging in bhakti, a person comes to realize the Supreme Lord. And then Next he says, Adhokshajalambhamiya subhatmana sharirina sansriti chakra shatanam tad brahma nirvana sukham vidurbudhas tato bhajadvam hriday hrideshwaram. So now he recommends this to his friends, that this is how bhakti acts. And Prahlad, of course, he had this experience himself, because it was described that Prahlad himself was like that, Grahagrastha, he was possessed by Lord, and he will sing, dance, sometimes shout loudly the names of the Lord. So this was also his own experience. So it says, Adhoksha jalambham ya ashubhatmana sharirana. So after attaining the Lord, then all the inauspicious things are removed. So when one has attained the Supreme Lord, then this existence in the material world, which is considered as inauspicious, this is completely cut off. Sanskriti chakra shatanam. This devotion cuts the cycle of birth and death for such a person. So the learned people, they call it Brahma Nirvana. Tad Brahma Nirvana Sukham Vidur Buddha. Some people say that this is Brahman realization. Some people say that this is the attainment of Nirvana Sukha or supreme bliss. And Bhajadvam Hriday Hrideshwar. So therefore, he says that you should worship the Lord in the heart. So earlier also he says that Koti Prayaso, that what is the big difficulty in worshipping the Lord? Because he is situated in the heart itself. You don't have to go anywhere to search for him or make any special endeavor. So again he is saying that you worship him in the heart, and he is the master of the heart. Hrideshwaram Hridaya Bhajat. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, he raises a doubt on this. He says, Nanu Brahma Nirvana Sukhameva Purushartha Sara iti Prasiddhi. So someone says that you are talking about Bhakti Yoga, but we have heard that the essence of life is to attain Brahma Nirvana Sukha, or the bliss of Brahman realization. So why we have to perform bhakti, and what do we gain from that? So he answers, Satyam tadapi adhokshad sanyog sukha eva antarbhavati. He says it is true that goal is ultimately to attain happiness, but that happiness comes from bhakti. He says that even that Brahma Nirvana Sukha, even if you think that the purpose is to attain bliss of Brahman, says that is also included in Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti will give you Bhakti Ananda, which is even superior to Brahmananda, and Brahmananda is included in it. So not only that you will have Brahma Nirvana Sukha, or this bliss of Brahman, but you will have much superior happiness than that. Adhokshajasya alambham manasa ishat sparsham sakshat praptiva sanskriti chakrasya satanam nivartakam vidur jananti. So he says that even a little contact with Krishna, even with mind, he says that it destroys completely the cycle of birth and death. And what to speak of attaining Him directly. Even if you can attain Him through the mind a little bit, even that will release you from the bondage of material existence. And this is what people call as Brahma Nirvana. Because Brahma Nirvana is nothing but becoming free from material misery. Esa Brahmi sthiti partha nainam prapya vibhiyate. Stitva syamant kalepi. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that this is the Brahmi sthiti. That one has become free from all the material desires. Prajhati yada kaman sarvan partha manavatan. Atmanyevatmana tushta sthit pragyasta. So this state of sthit pragya, where one has become free from all material desires, that is Brahma Nirvana Sukha. Because it is material desires which cause disturbance to the mind. Or disturbance comes because of desires. Every desire is a disturbance to the mind. And if one becomes free from the desires, then one is situated in Brahma. But Bhakti Yoga is beyond that. So Bhakti Yoga actually gives you superior happiness or positive happiness. Because in Brahma Nirvana Sukha there is no reciprocation. There is no experience. Actually the experience is only that one has become free from the material desires. But simply freedom from material desire is happiness, but that is not something positive. So therefore he says that when one has happiness in relationship with love with God, then that happiness is superior than simply being free from disturbance. So Brahma Nirvana stage is only a state of not having any disturbance. So therefore he says, adhokshajasya alambham manasayishat sparsham sakshat prapti. Therefore even a very little contact with adhokshaja makes mind completely peaceful. Because our mind is attracted to things which we like. And God is the most likable object. Our experience of Him, then He is immediately fixed on that and cannot be deterred or moved or disturbed by anything else. Therefore, Sanskriti Chakrasya Shatanam, that the bondage to the material world is naturally cut. Tadeva Brahma Nirvanam Sukham cha adhokshajasya Brahmatvat. So that is also Brahma Nirvana Sukha, that is bliss of Brahman realization. Because adhokshaj Krishna is also Brahman, as he says in Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratishtham amritasya vyasya. Tacharan madhurya anubhavasya eva paramanand rupatvena nirvana sukh swarupatvat. So the sweetness or the happiness which comes by relating to Krishna, to God, that is superior to any other happiness. Therefore it is called Paramananda Rupa. Paramananda Rupa means it is supremely blissful. There is no higher pleasure than that. And it is eternal. So therefore it is called Paramananda Rupa or Nirvana Sukha Swarupatva. And then if you can have a specific relationship with God, then it is even higher type of bliss. So it says, Tatra dasyadi bhavatvena Mamata visheshotham tu sukham adhikam aparam. So mamata is the feeling of love towards God. So there is happiness when one is not suffering. If one becomes free from all suffering, that is also happiness. But this happiness which comes from love, that is superior to it. So if one has a relationship with God in love, then that happiness is much superior than even the happiness of liberation or Brahma Nirvana. Yatha sarvajan subhage paramalahadake chandre drishte yasvabhavik anandas tasmat koti gunit ananda swaputre shandanandha badhire api sarvajan durbhage api mamta uttasyat. So he gives one example. This is an example if you are here in India in the summertime. So in summer it's very hot. And at night, when the sun goes down and the moon comes out, then you feel relief. Because moon is cooling. So you feel a sense of relief and you feel happy. Because it is cooler at night. So he says this is one type of happiness. But compare this happiness with another happiness. That suppose you are a mother or a father and you have a child and you love your child. So you get a different type of happiness by just seeing your child. So you see the moon at night, that is one type of happiness. But you get much superior happiness by seeing your own child whom you love. Even if the child is not saying anything, he doesn't speak anything. He's like a dumb fellow. But to speak of the child speaks something. So he says this is the comparison. The difference is that you may like the moon, but it's not that you have a love for the moon. Just okay, you see the moon, you appreciate, it looks nice, and it is cooling. But if you have a person whom you love, then that gives some very deep feeling in your heart. You don't get that feeling by looking at the moon. Looking at the moon, okay, you feel some kind of pleasure. But nothing that your heart is shaking, or your hair are standing on the end out of love, or you have tears in your eyes, or your heartbeat is going faster. So when you see somebody whom you love, then you may have all these symptoms. And this is a pleasure which is of different type, different quality, different characteristic. So he says that the pleasure which one gets by realizing Brahman, which has no form, no qualities, that is one type of pleasure, because there is no loving relationship. And the pleasure when you realize God as a person and have a loving exchange with Him, this is a different type. So this is the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, the path of Jnana and path of Bhakti. So he says that some people call this as Brahma Nirvana Sukham. So Brahma Nirvana Sukham can be taken as two words or one word. So he says the happiness, bliss which one gets from bhakti therefore is much superior than that of Brahman realization. Ato bhagavati dasyadi bhavatve par brahmani swarupotheva paramananda avadhi tatrehi yadi mamto uttopi syat tada kim bhakta. So he says that this happiness which comes by realizing the Supreme Lord in relationship such as servant or friend, this is the limit of happiness. And in that also, if one has love, then that is even higher. आनंद पारावर पर सहस्र संवर्ध मध्य पातित्व स्वभगोत्कर्ष महामहत्व. So he is using a very long word to explain this happiness. He says this is like a great fortune, as if you have been thrown into an ocean of bliss. So there is an ocean, imagine that ocean is made of bliss. Every drop of that ocean is happiness. So Ananda Paravar Parasahasra Sambandha. And there are waves in it, and you are thrown into that ocean and you are completely submerged in it. So from all sides there is only happiness. From every pore of your body you feel bliss. So that is the bliss of bhakti. And therefore it is said that ya nivritti stadbhritam tapada padmadhyanad majjan katha shravanameva vasyat sa brahmani swamahimni apinathamabhut kim tvantakashilulitati patat vimanat. So this Dhruva Maharaj, he prayed that, he says that the happiness, the joy which one experiences by realizing loving relationship with God, by hearing His stories, bhavajjan katha shravanena vasyat, so that cannot be compared to the bliss of realizing Brahman. And he says then what to speak of this happiness of heaven. Sometimes people say that in heaven there is happiness. So he says this happiness of heaven is very insignificant and it is temporary, because you don't live in heaven permanently, and it is not as great as even Brahma Nirvana, and what to speak of Bhakti. So this is the comparison which is given by Dhruva. And elsewhere it is said, Brahmanando bhavedesha cheta parardha gunikrita naiti bhakti sukham bodhe parmanu tulamapi. So here it is said that if you take the bliss of Brahman realization and multiply it by millions and millions of times, still it cannot compare to one drop of happiness from the ocean of bliss of Bhakti Yoga. So this is the comparison. It's like you want to compare 0 with any positive number. So there is no comparison. Because no matter how much you multiply 0, it remains 0. So there is actually no comparison between the bliss of liberation and bliss of Bhakti Yoga. And this is what Prahlad is speaking from his own experience. That's why this Prahlad, he was tortured by his father to give up bhakti, but he did not give up. He was a 5-year-old boy tortured by his demoniac father to stop being a devotee, but he did not give up, because for him giving up Bhakti Yoga is most hellish than any other suffering which could be given to him by his father. So he was willing to tolerate any suffering, but not give up bhakti, because giving up bhakti will be most painful. So that's why he says here that this is called Nirvana Sukha Vidur Buddha Bhajadvam Hriday Hrideshwar. Thus he is advising his classmates to worship that Lord. Adhokshaj alambam iti pathe adhokshaj alambo vishyalambano yattam. So in some books there is a different reading. Instead of adhokshaj alamba, which means attaining Adhokshaj or Krishna. The word used is Adhokshaj Alamba, which means that he is the object of meditation. Arthat dasya sakhyadi rasam hridishwaram hridayanatham iti dasyadi bhav vishishta bhaktir vidyate. So that means that one worships the Lord considering oneself as servant or friend, etc. in the heart. So in this way he describes bhakti. And then in the next verse he says that it is not very difficult to do that. So he says, Koti prayaso sur balaka hare rupasne swahridi chidravat satah swasyatmane sakyo rase shadehinam samanyatim kim rishyo papadani. He says that it is not very difficult to perform bhakti because Lord is available in one's own heart, just like the sky. Just like the sky is everywhere, like that He is available in our own heart. And swasya atmana sakyurasesh dehinam. So to worship this Lord who is the friend of everyone and also the object of love. So he says there is no problem, no difficulty in doing that. And therefore what is the use of making effort for anything else? Because whatever we do, we ultimately want happiness from our actions, from our endeavors, from our efforts. But usually we don't get that happiness. And even if we get it, it is very little, it is temporary, it is mixed with some problem, and it leads to bondage. But if we attain love of God, then the happiness which we get is permanent, unlimited, without any suffering. And there is no bondage involved in it. It becomes absolutely free. So therefore he says that you do it, and it does not involve any big effort. Because to achieve anything else you have to go somewhere. He says to worship God you don't have to go anywhere, it's in your heart. Even if you have to eat something, you have to get up from your chair at least. So he says that although these days everything is becoming remote controlled, so you don't have to move, but God, he says, is Koti prayaso asur balkanam hare rupasne hridi chidravatsata, that he is in your own heart. Sarvashreshthaapi bhakte sukh sadhyatva mahakopi. So bhakti is the best process, and it is also the easiest of all. That is the beauty. Sometimes something is best, but it's difficult. You want best food, maybe expensive, but you want best food and it is the cheapest. And why would you go for any other food and pay more and get something which is not like it? So Bhakti Yoga is the best path of spiritual realization and the easiest, pleasurable. So why take to anything else? Chidravat Akashvat, Lord is available in the heart. Atmano Jivasya Sakhyu, he is friend of every living being. Sayuja Sakhayo. So, see, like two birds sitting inside this body. Iti Shrute Nahi Sakhyurupasne Kinchit Kashtamiti Bhava. And it's not very difficult to please a friend. Upasyasya Svato Vidyamanatvat Priyatvat Cha Upasnasya Cha Sravanadi Rupatvat. So Lord, He is number one, naturally present in the heart, Number 2, he is lovely, he is lovable, he is beautiful. And number 3, his worship is very simple, even hearing about him, he is worshipping. Tat sadhananam sravanadinam chasvate vividyamanatvat. And the practices like hearing, etc., manifest by themselves, because when one desires, then these names become manifest on our senses. Nahi kutaschan kachan tat samagri anetavyamiti. So there is no need to bring anything external. Otherwise you need something external. Varam narak sadhane api sramovasti. So even if you want to go to hell, you have to do some effort. Not easy. Bhakti is easier than that. Because even to go to hell, you have to do something wrong. Some effort is needed. Vyanjan vayasik sukh pravritti nindati. And then these pleasures which come from sense objects, they are very troublesome. Vishyanam srachandan vanitadinam uppadanai dravyadi uparjanai kim. So you want sense objects, you have to work very hard because everything is available by money. You work hard, then you have to pay taxes to the government. And then you get the object, what you desire, and it may not actually give you what you are desiring. So tatra hetu sarvdehinam samanyata vishaya nishthatve sukaradi sadharanya patteriti. He says that this pleasure which we get from sense objects, that is available even to the pigs. So what is special about you as human beings? So if human beings want to enjoy the same pleasure which pigs are also having, then how are we better than them? So as human beings we should have superior pleasure. And that is beyond sense objects. The pleasure which comes from sense objects, that all living beings have that. Whether human beings or other living beings, birds, aquatics, animals, cats, dogs, they all have sense pleasure. Human beings can also have that, and people are having that. But it says that is not very intelligent. That is not a use of intelligence. The real use of human intelligence is to get pleasure which is beyond sense pleasure. Then we are using our intellect properly. So that comes from yoga, from bhakti yoga. So there are two types of pleasure. Pleasure which comes through the senses, and a pleasure which comes from beyond the senses. So the one which comes from senses, that everybody is trying for that. And it is never satisfying. You get it, and after some time you want more of it. You never feel fulfilled that, okay, I had this particular type of sense pleasure. Now I am satisfied. I don't need any more of it. After some time, then again you get it. You get the desire to have it. But the other type of pleasure which comes beyond senses, sense objects, once you have it, then you don't need anything. It is eternal. So, intelligent people, they work for the second one. That's what Krishna says. Yahi sansparsja bhoga dukhyone egate adyantavanta konte nateshu rante. Says that intelligent people, they do not work just for sense pleasure. Because sense pleasure is limited and temporary, and does not satisfy me completely. So they work for this pleasure which comes beyond that. And then one is completely satisfied, completely happy. So this is the instruction of Prahlad to his classmates. And I'll stop here if there is any question on this.
You spoke of the ocean of bliss, Bhakti-Aranda. Is it experienced gradually, or does it unfold in order to unfold? Does you need to have the direct association of Krishna or the darshan of Krishna?
No, not necessarily.
Or is it just a question of your motivation with which you perform your service?
It is from the service. That is the very nature of bhakti. This nature of bhakti itself is pleasure. Being Antaranga Shakti. This just gives pleasure by its very characteristic. That's why they say that bhakti is a combination of Radhani Shakti, pleasure, potency, and some with knowledge. So that bhakti itself gives pleasure. That's why he said bhakti sukham bodhe. That bliss of bhakti sukha. Just like there is a vishaya sukha, sense pleasure, there is a bhakti sukha.
So then why are great devotees yearning for the darshan of Krishna?
That's also bhakti. Because when you love, you also want to see the object of love. It's characteristic of love. Characteristic of love is to have the object of love with you and to see the object of love happy, to serve, to please. Isn't it? If you love somebody, then you want to be with that person. Yes.
So you say that the process is so easy that it is more difficult going to hell. And then why are we not in bliss? Where is that ocean of bliss?
Why are we not in bliss?
Why are we miserable?
Why are we miserable? Because we are not doing bhakti. When you do bhakti, then you cannot be in the misery. It's not possible.
So that means bhakti is really a hidden, secret, confidential thing that it's not so easy to understand it and to check it out and to approach it even.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, he's saying it is very easy, which is also true, but it's also not easy because of our mind being attached to so many other things. So the thing is that either you do bhakti or you do other things. They don't mix. So when bhakti is there, then there is only bhakti. When bhakti is not there, then there is something else. So although we speak of mixed bhakti, but really speaking, bhakti doesn't mix with anything.
Mishra Bhakti, when Bhakti is mixed with jnana or karma, something, yoga, the bliss does not...
Means one is trying to use bhakti to get some benefit. It's not doing bhakti for the sake of bhakti. He wants something else from bhakti. So you may feel some bliss, but not the type which is described here.
So that means if that ocean of bliss cannot be experienced, our bhakti is in one way or another mixed with other things.
Yes.
Jnana, yoga, karma,
Yeah, with something.
internet. Facebook.
But, for example, if they use it for themselves, then what is the problem?
No problem. It has to be for service.
So then the
So
question
therefore this, even if it is not mixed, then you may not experience because of our disease. And that is, as it is described, just like when somebody is sick, if you have fever, then you don't taste food as you taste when you are healthy. So when you are sick, you may be having proper diet, which should taste good, right? One is that your diet is not proper and therefore it will not taste good anyway, it's not proper diet. But diet is proper. You have a nice cake or a halwa and it is not tasting good to you, so this is because you are sick. So that's also the situation, that you may be performing bhakti and that bhakti is not mixed with anything. But because you are conditioned, and unless we become free from that conditioning, then we don't experience the taste of bhakti. So that is the situation of people in general. So that sweet or cake has the ingredients to give you that taste, but you should also have the tongue to taste it. If you are sick with heavy fever, then you lose taste. So its problem is not with the food, but with my sense. So similarly with bhakti also you may perform it and not experience what is being described. Anybody who will describe cake, he will say, well, cake is very nice, taste sweet. Right? That's how they will say. So he's saying the same thing, but some person who is sick, he tastes and he says, well, I don't taste it the way it is being described. So there are two possibilities. One is either it's really not a cake, it may look like one, or there is something wrong with the tongue. So therefore some people are not performing bhakti, although they seem to be, they think like that. Therefore they don't see the result. Other people may be performing bhakti, but because of their own conditioning, they still don't realize the sweetness of bhakti. So it will take time for them to get cured from that conditioning, and then they will realize.
Bhakti itself is the cure.
Bhakti itself is the cure.
But it may take a long time. Good.
So, what is wrong with that? If it takes long time, what do you want to do in the meantime?